5. The Forbidden Zones of Black Magic. The crisis of possession or adorcism has allowed us to penetrate more deeply into the realm of the voodoo, alternate reality. The trance of the composite state has made manifest some compartments of the shadow matter parallel universe. However, from the testimony of the adepts, there are still more compartments of a truly fantastic nature known only by members of secret societies. These societies exist also in Africa, as well as in the New World. In Haiti, they have thrived in colonial time through marriage in the mountains and forests of the island. The Marinage was a community of escaped slaves, freedom fighters bent on destroying the establishment of the oppressors through guerrilla warfare. These societies of Maroons shared some deep secrets of the shadowy alternate realities. In Haiti, they have nefarious reputation and are known under the names of Zobop, Bizango, Zampuel, or Champuel, Vling Biding, Loup Garou, Makanda, and Regiment. We have already heard of them in a preceding chapter in reference to the egregore Bizango Makaya, or conglomerate of dark matter entities, of chain of voodoo spirits. The core of their rituals is the Petro Zandor rite. The voodoos of or gods served in this rite are the most brutal and dangerous ones. Among them are Erzuli Mapiang, Marinette Pichesh, Tijan Petro, Tijan Zandor, Tijan Pichesh, Grand Bois Lillet, Simbi Makaya, Jean-Baptiste, Vixama Legrand, God of the Bizango, Limba Zaou, Leng Lusu Basenzang, Makandal, Nkadi, Mpemba, the equivalent of Satan, Loa Krabinet, Lucifer, Criminel Petro. In our thesis, we will use the generic name of Zandor to describe the phenomena derived from the ritual. Thus, Zandorism is the knowledge and practice of the Zandor ritual. A Zandorist is an adept. The term Zandoric can be applied to a service, a spell, an kita, a wanga, an enterprise, or a journey in the dimension or world, in the dimension or world of the Zandor. Also considering the Janus type nature of any Loa or Vodun, a good or bad priest, Huga or Boko, can use any of them for destruction or blessing. However, in Zandoric quantum land, nefarious purposes are more often seen, along with manifestations that belong to the science fiction or fairy tales, or fairy tale worlds. The Cartesian mind, confined in its three-dimensional rationality, will discard them as imaginary, fantasy, illusion, or tales for the gullible. However, the new metaphysics, born out of the paradoxes of quantum physics, have opened the door of alternate reality, of parallel universes, of a world beyond the Newtonian and Euclidean three-dimensional reality. The Copenhagen school has made room for the psychic aspect of reality that has been ignored by the narrow-minded rationalistic society. The uncertainty principle points to our boundary constraints or limitations in understanding the world. There is more in nature than the Newtonian laws. Other methods of experimentation exist. The Wu-Li masters of China, the French surrealist poets, and the champions of the new metaphysics try to perceive reality in two ways: the rational and the irrational, the analytical and the intuitive. On the island of Haiti, the African Haitian culture lives the dualism of the ordinary and non ordinary realities. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics recognizes the validity of other experiences that are not conducted in a classical manner, such as the psychic aspect, the religious enlightenment, the prophetic revelation, biblical or otherwise, and the encounter with other dimensions, such as shadow matter entities. However, some rational approaches can be used in the exploration of alternate realities. The researcher must submit himself to the environment of the Hunfo, where he can experience firsthand in a concrete manner the manifestation of invisible matter. The researcher can seek initiation in Zandorism or plain voodooism in the manner of the pre-Socratic philosophers vis-a-vis their Egyptian masters, if they don't have exposure to the parallel universe like many African Haitians do. However, some deep understanding of voodoo singularities will necessitate a brush or close encounter or an initiation into the realm of the Zandoric spirits. The researchers must take the Zandoric journey. They must make the quantum jump from the ambiguity barrier beyond which dominate the realm of uncertainty, of duality, of irrationality, of objectivity being modulated by subjectivity. There they will find, wait, the researchers must take the Zandoric journey. They must make the quantum jump through the ambiguity barrier beyond which dominate the realm of uncertainty, of duality, of irrationality, of subjectivity being modulated by of objectivity being modulated by subjectivity. There they will discover what materiality and spirituality have another meaning. That materiality and spirituality have another meaning. Matter will become coiled strings of spirituality. And that spirituality, while it is not materiality, is nevertheless physicality. As far as our personal neo-vitalist worldview is concerned, it is not a materialism, but rather a physicalism. The old boundaries between materialism and idealism are becoming blurred with the implications and revelations of modern contemporary physics. Matter is no longer what we thought it was, and the spiritual realm has changed also. The concept of unbroken wholeness of the universe presented by David Bohm shows that everything in the cosmos are fractal expressions of a unique space-time continuum. Matter and spirit are two expressions of a single entity. The primal master force emanated by fiat from immanence, existence per se, that has evolved as space-time and manifested itself as matter and energy with multiple different dimensions. From the primal master force came visible matter, wave function, quantum and its principles, dark matter or invisible matter, and psychion or pure psychic or spiritual energy. Thus, the spirit as force or energy shares the physicality of the other forces or energies. It is coexistential with the other forces of the unbroken wholeness. It is property of existence. It is of the essence of existence. Matter is no longer that vile, degraded substance that we used to think of, but is the massive expression of a continuum that is at the same time psychism, motion, life. Thus, space time is alive and conscious of its existence. Here, the concept of life goes beyond biology to involve the whole cosmos and to make the organicity of the bios on Earth only a novel expression of the unbroken wholeness. Thus, my neo-vitalism is neither a materialism or idealism. It could be said to be an existentialism or a dualism or a dualist existentialism. Because of the equivalence of mass and energy, we cannot accept the idea that mass or matter does not exist, as certain metaphysicists, metaphysicians, and mystics are claiming when facing the transience of the massive state, the impermanence of matter. The impermanence of matter. At the level of our reality, One of the Feynman diagrams shows that there exists a permanent alteration between particle and wave, between mass and energy, between matter and force, inside and around every atom in our constitutional manifestation. There is a permanent translation or metamorphosis from one state to the next, establishing once for all the permanence of transiency in our realities. At every moment in our subatomic foundation, being and non being continuously alternate. At one moment, the particle is seen, and in the next, it is gone, vanished. This does not mean that it was an illusion. In reality, it has only transmuted to an energy state, an invisible wave function status. That permanent alternation between being and non being, between visible and invisibility, between one compartment of reality to an alternate one, is at the core of the Zandoric singularities experienced by the adepts of the Petro Zandor rite. What are the claims that constitute the singularities experienced by the Zandorist? They are the ones that stand in opposition or contradiction to our classical logic, namely the power of invisibility, invulnerability, ubiquity, the power of transmutation, dematerialization, rematerialization, avatars, and metamorphosis, the power of teletransportation, instantaneous propagation, levitation, the power of time travel in the past and in the future, retrocognition, precognition, out of body travel, the power of telepathy, telekinesis, and healing, and the power of subaquatic existence. Those Sandoric singularities fall into the realm of a different logical system, that of the alternate pathways of quantum logic. There exists an unlimited number of these pathways. How do we enter the door leading to these alternate pathways of quantum land? Access to the forbidden zones or Vodou singularities is acquired through the trance state. The trance state is like an event horizon beyond the ambiguity barrier, where all the paradoxes become naked realities, where all the possibilities and their probabilities are vying for actualization. The trance state heightens the energy of our wave function, facilitating the direction of the fundamental equation E equals mc squared in the reverse. It accomplishes in the cool what modern contemporary scientists are accomplishing in the hot with their cyclotron, bevatron, or super collider, and atomic or nuclear weaponry. Let me take that again. It accomplishes in the cool what modern contemporary scientists are accomplishing in the hot with their cyclotron, bevatron, and or super collider, and atomic or nuclear weaponry. The sheer advantage of the trans state is that it keeps the forward back reversibility of the equation. The sheer advantage of the trans state is that it keeps the forward backward reversibility of the equation so that the Zandorist can go back and forth from ordinary realities to the alternate realities of singularities. At this point, it is necessary to warn the curious that the Zandoric journey into the singularities is fraught with dangers, as the adept is stirring forces that he may not be able to control. The induction into the realm of the Vodouns can be done by self hypnosis, hypnosis by another person or entity, and through the composite state of possession. We have already seen the connection between sleep, hypnosis, and the crisis of possession. Sleep is the most common altered state of consciousness known to human beings and animals, and the tripartite nature of mankind revealed by the African Haitian ontology has helped us unravel some aspect of the dream state, hypnosis, and adorcism. Modern practice of hypnosis has discarded the crisis part of the original mesmerism because it is too dreadfully painful for the subjects, and also because the practitioners have rejected the theory of animal magnetism presented by Franz Anton Mesmer. However, the reality of the matter is that what Mesmer presented as animal magnetism in his Newtonian understanding of the universe is nothing else than the complex wave function shadow matter component of our nature. Some of his disciples and modern practitioners have chosen to deal primarily with the power of suggestion or autosuggestion to induce and exploit the state of hypnosis. The power of suggestion is nothing else than a manifestation of our wave function dimension. The animal magnetism of Mesmer was presented as a fractal or a fraction of the universal magnetism that permeates everything in in the cosmos. Mesmer has discarded among his subjects people affected by organic diseases. Only people suffering from psychosomatic illnesses were acceptable candidates. He theorized that a decrease in the flow of animal magnetism or wave function through the nervous system leads to malfunction of the organs and the whole body's physiology is in disarray. Wait, let me take that again. He theorized that a decrease in the flow of animal magnetism or wave function through the nervous system leads to malfunction of the organs and the body's physiology is in disarray. This causes blood vessels to harden, the circulation to become viscous, and joints to become stiff. With the re-establishment of the normal flow of the universal fluid or animal magnetism through the system, health can be restored. The crisis consisted in a sudden outpouring of that magnetism in the individual to galvanize all the organs' functions. However, in discarding organic disease, Mesmer failed to realize that the psychosomatic pathway creates physical disease. If his intervention can cure the organic anatomical presentation of the psychosomatic diseases, it should be able to alter the course of organic diseases caused by other agents. Hypertension, peptic ulcer disease, arthritis, and some cancers can be the result of psychosomatic disturbances or other physical agents. In both situations, the power of suggestion or the manipulation of magnetism and the use of chemicals or drugs or surgery can give improvement or cure. The Zandoris does not go for these distinctions. Everything can be cured by Vodou healing power. There are a lot of similarities between the first phase of mesmerism, called the crisis, and the onset of Vodou possession. The Mesmerian crisis is of a bosal nature, that is, the subject reacts like a wild horse to the magnetic galvanization, like the non-initiate in a Vodou realm reacting to the invasion of his spirit by the spirit, of his system by the spirit. Mesmer would induce the crisis by touching and stroking the bodies of his subjects or by wielding his wand to bring on the altered state. During a Vodou service, the Hugan or Mambo can induce adorcism in individuals by giving them a handshake or by twirling them into a pirouette. In both cases, Mesmer's magnetism and onset of adorcism, the subject needs attendance to prevent self-injury. Mesmer used to have padded rooms for his seance, and the Hunsi Kanzo at the Hunfo assist readily the mounted adept. By bypassing the crisis phase of the mesmeric trance, the modern hypnotist manipulates the IPN and the shadow component of the individual through the power of suggestion in a mild-mannered fashion. The trance state is induced by fixing the attention of the subject on the moving fingers of the hypnotist. Is that modernized technique capable of inducing naked singularities? The answer is positive, but only for weak ones of the order of ESP, and even ESP is kept under suspicion by some modern contemporary researchers in hypnosis. They even doubt that subjects under hypnosis are capable of accomplishing extraordinary feats, such as showing unusual physical strength. The only positive aspect of hypnosis, according to those researchers, is in the realm of analgesia and memory recall. Mesmer maintained that the crisis was necessary to obtain spectacular results. Suggestion, imagination, emotions, and predisposition or willingness did find a place in Mesmer's theory, but only as secondary factors. We will see later how the mental construct of the adept will modulate the events in Vodou singularities. In Mesmerism, the founder of the method conceded that the secondary factors could open or close the valves of the subject's animal magnetism. A hostile or indifferent patient can hinder the normal flow of magnetism from the practitioner to himself. He must have faith and confidence in the performer. For Mesmer, the laws and principles of his Newtonian physics were to remain basic. The practitioner must be aware of the reality of the universal magnetic fluid in order to control the waves entering the body from outside and get rid of the illness. The practitioner must be aware of the reality of the universal magnetic fluid in order to control the waves entering the body from outside and get rid of the illness. When the mesmerist is convinced of the reality of the universal magnetic fluid, he can accumulate a heavy load within himself and then, at will, transfer the necessary amount to a sick individual. Wait, let me get that again. And when the mesmerist is convinced of the reality of the universal magnetic fluid, he can accumulate a heavy load within himself and then at will transfer the necessary amount to a sick individual in order to trigger the crisis that is the manifestation of the antagonizing magnetic flow and the reaction of the body and its illness to that invading force. In order to trigger the crisis that is the manifestation of the antagonizing magnetic flow and the reaction of the body and its illness to that invading force. Okay. From the point of view of Mesmer, the crisis stage of the trance is necessary to accomplish supranormal feats, such as the mesmerized girl described by Madame Vigier Labron, who was capable, while in a delirious state, with eyes tightly closed, of telling the time with precision. She mentioned also the claims about a literate woman who, when mesmerized, who can guess what illness a person is suffering and prescribe the right treatment and regimen for it. We have to specify that Madame Vigier Lebrun was a detractor of mesmerism. The singularities of the Sandoric experience have many analogies in their induction with that of the mesmeric crises. The royal commissions that investigated mesmerism in 1784 reported that the convulsions are characterized by violent, involuntary movements of arms, legs, and the whole body, constriction of the pharynx, palpitation in the chest, nausea or stomach upset, rapid blinking and crossed eyes, piercing cries, hiccups, tears, or uncontrollable laughter. Those seizures are preceded or followed by a state of torpor and daydreams. Sometimes the experience can be pleasant. Charles Duhousset, an army officer who wrote one of the testimonials of medicine, declared that he made a spectacular recovery from a whole set of ailments such as fever, shaking chills, exophthalmos, protruded eyes, and partial paralysis. When he entered into the crisis of the trance state, he experienced powerful sensations from head to toe. The crisis was associated with an intense cold sensation that his body seemed to be turning into a block of ice. This was followed by an intense heat causing a fetid sweating. This crisis was a long-ranged one, lasting more than 4 weeks. After a month, he made steady progress in his recovery. In 4 months, he was able to stand up, walk without difficulty, and without breathe easily. Oh, come on, where am I? Ba, ba, ba. And breathe easily without any chest discomfort. His appetite was excellent. In brief, he was free of all infirmities. At any rate, the crisis was a dreaded experience, and patients, as well as practitioners, were willing to avoid it. The cure would be the cure would be welcome if that painful phase could be eliminated. The evolution of the practice will give us hypnotism, which is mesmerism without the convulsive crisis. Likewise, likewise in voodoo ritual, the lave tete or the Hunsi initiation prepares the adept to be mounted by the loa or vaudoons without the commotion, the struggle, the convulsions of the borsal crisis. However, We must understand that the Voduns of the Petrozandor rite are, by nature, bossal, wild, tempestuous entities, and they mount their adept in a forceful and convulsive manner. They require violent acts and impose nefarious demands. At the core of the Zandoric phenomena, as well as mesmerism or hypnotism, is the trance state or altered state of consciousness that opens the door to the world of singularities. In hypnosis, the shadow clone of the individual moves to the fore, obliterates the awareness of the body's IPN, and takes over the functioning of the latter, thereby leading the interactions between the individual and the external world. However, in that state, the patient's shadow clone is subservient to the will of the practitioner. He is somewhat possessed or mounted by the wave function of the hypnotist or mesmerist. In adorcism or its variant, the Zandoric possession, the trance state is produced by a reversal of the corps cadavre or semido relation. The semido or shadow matter double takes over command, pushing the conscious IPN in the dream realm. But then the semido is wide open to possession by the foreign entity or Vodun, who proceeds to take over the whole person and transfers him into the realm of Zandoric singularities. This composite state of adept and Zandor actualizes as a coherent superposition. Hmm. This composite. Nah, actually, let me go back here. Nah, let me start from here again. Sorry. In adorcism or its variant, the Zandoric possession, the trance state, is produced by a reversal of the corps cadavre or semido relation. The semido or shadow matter double takes over command, pushing the conscious IPN in the dream world. But then the semido is wide open to possession by the foreign entity or Vodun, who proceeds to take over the whole person and transfers him into the realm of the Zandoric singularities. This composite state of adept and Zandor actualizes as a coherent superposition and becomes a new entity in itself. As a wave function, this new entity is a coherent superposition of all possibilities, including naked singularities. Wow. I need to use Mendeley or something to highlight these so much. But anyway, this composite state of adept and Zandor actualizes as a coherent superposition and becomes a new entity in itself. As a wave function, this new entity is a coherent superposition of all possibilities, including naked singularities. A coherent superposition of all possibilities arising from the composite state of adept and Zandor. Right. Entering the forbidden zones of the African Haitian alternate reality necessitates some fundamental changes in the subatomic, atomic, and molecular composition of the adept. Passing from the ordinary state to the trance state involves great changes in energy level. The four forces that maintain our structure in ordinary reality begin also to vibrate at a very high energy level. Wait. This sounds very important. I need to take this all the way back. Sorry. Listen, let's go back one more paragraph, come back here. Because vibrating at very high energy level, this is key. Let's go back here. In adorcism or its variant, the Zandoric possession, the trance state is produced by a reversal of the corps cadavre or semido relation. The semido or shadow matter double takes over command, pushing the conscious IPN in the dream realm. But then the semido is wide open to possession by the foreign entity or Vodun, who proceeds to take over the whole person and transfers him into the realm of Zandoric singularities. This composite state of adept and Zandor actualizes as a coherent superposition and becomes a new entity in itself. As a wave function, this new entity is a coherent superposition of all possibilities, including naked singularities. A coherent superposition of all possibilities, including naked singularities. All right. Entering the forbidden zones of the African Haitian alternate reality necessitates some fundamental changes in the subatomic, atomic, and molecular composition of the adept. Passing from the ordinary state to the trance state involves great changes in energy level. Involves great changes in energy level. Every particle begins to vibrate at a very high energy level. The four forces that maintain our structure in ordinary reality begin also to vibrate at a very high energy level, reaching velocity beyond that of light. Other electromagnetic radiations, X-ray, strong force, W force, and gravity to attain that of tachyon or psychion state. A powerful magnetic field, a maelstrom of energy, is created inside and around the subject. In less singular cases, such as that of Uri Geller, very famous for his power of telekinesis, moving objects and bending forks at a distance, the Stanford researchers defined him as one big walking magnetic field. Who was one big walking magnetic field? Uri Geller. Okay, Uri. Let me Google this. Google this nigga, man. Still believe in Google, right? Yes, sir. Um, The high vibratory state of modern physics is equal to high velocity or acceleration. According to Einstein's general theory of relativity, acceleration is the equivalent of gravity. In other words, acceleration and gravity are two ways of saying the same thing. In the Zandoric state, as the high energy level increases, acceleration also increases. As the energy level increases, acceleration also increases to create a supergravity state that places the subject on the threshold or event horizon, like the black hole of Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking. The event horizon is the area around the entrance of a black hole that forms a tremendously powerful gravitational field or curvature that makes everything nearby skid into the center of the black hole. Furthermore, according to Einstein's general theory, there is equivalence between gravity and mass. Hence, a piece of matter is a curvature of the space-time continuum. The ultimate attraction for the great physicist is that gravity is curved space-time, is acceleration, motion. Gravity is equivalent to mass, and mass or matter is curvature of space-time. Thus, from his famous equation E equals mc squared, we can see that energy equals mass. Mass is curvature, and energy is curvature. This is the unbroken wholeness of space time in all its splendor. It is at this point of the equivalence of mass or matter and energy that the transmutation of matter into energy or psychionic force, spiritual force, can take place. This is facilitated by supergravity state. In this state of affairs, supergravity is endowed with the power to violate many conservation laws. The conservation laws, 12 in total, impose absolute checks and structure on every type of subatomic interaction. In their jurisdiction, they establish inviolable law rules that shape the form of all particle interactions. They constitute boundary constraints, but the supergravitational force can override many of the conservation constraints. In the Zandoric superposition of high energy or vibratory state, the supergravitational field is ready in the twinkling of an eye to shift the existential equation toward energy, wave function, or psychionic state, which is the physical reality commonly known as spiritual. This is facilitated by a phenomenon that is already in place in the subatomic dimension, consisting in a perpetual transformation of matter into energy, of visibility into invisibility, and a perpetual reversal of energy into matter. This is what we call permanent alternation. The corollary of the permanent alternation is the permanent transiency. The massive aspect of ordinary reality is produced by the sheer astronomical number of particles passing from one state to the next. They do not change to the same state at once. When a group or many groups are in the massive state, others are in the energy state. When a group or many groups are in the massive state, others are in the energy state. The laws of probability in our branch of the parallel universes favor more space-time events in the massive state at all times than in the energy state. The laws of probability in our branch of the parallel universes favor more space-time events in the massive state at all time than in the energy state. The permanent alternation as diagrammed by Feynman can be seen as a zigzag or the letter Z or Z. Um, an electron, while traveling forward in time, an electron while traveling forward in time and space emits two photons. Okay? An electron while traveling forward in time and space emits two photons and thus is transformed into a positron arrow going backward in time. Then, by absorbing two photons, the positron reverses course or direction and becomes an electron like before. This example illustrates a particle or antiparticle annihilation. However, there is more than this phenomenon. According to the quantum field theory, every subatomic event is marked by the annihilation of the initial particles and the creation of new ones. In another Feynman diagram, a negative pi meson, I don't know what this word is, meson, like a boson, is that how you pronounce it? Meson or meson? A negative pi meson, colliding with a photon, yeah, it's probably meson, disappears in the process. They are annihilated. The energy issued from their mass plus the energy of motion create two new particles, a lambda particle and a neutral K meson. The latter particles are short-lived, unstable, exist less than a billionth of a second, and decay rapidly into the other particles. The neutral K meson is transformed into a positive pi meson and a negative pi meson. The mesons can be called today gluons, that is, particulate form of the energy strong force. The lambda particle, on the other hand, miraculously decays into the original two particles, the negative pi meson or gluon, and the photon. Furthermore, a collision between two photons, particulate form of energy, of light energy, creates an electron-positron pair, that is, matter or mass, and immediately after that pair annihilate each other. They recreate again two photons, light energy, according to Gary Zukov. Particles in the subatomic world partake forever of this unceasing dance of annihilation and creation, of being and non-being, of visibility and invisibility. This is one of the most psychedelic discoveries of the 20th century. Wait, let me take that again. According to Gary Zukov, particles in the subatomic world partake forever in this unceasing dance of annihilation and creation, of being and non-being, of visibility and invisibility. Okay? The high energy state of the high vibratory state induced by the trance throws the subject into that supergravitational dimension that can violate the conservation laws and attracts him into a black hole like situation where singularities dominate. In that dimension, the probabilities shift toward the energy part of the equation or wave function reality with all its avatars. Thus, Zandoric singularity is that state in which the ordinary laws of reality cease to apply. Zandoric singularity is that state in which the ordinary laws of reality cease to apply, opening the door to other dimensions where the equivalence of mass and energy reigns. According to physicists, there exist two types of black holes, a rotating one and a non rotating one. If the trans-state gravitational field creates a rotating black hole condition, the Zandorist translated into wave function will emerge in another time and place in our current universe at tachyonic speed. For example, from Port-au-Prince to Cap Haitien, or Cap Haitien, or from Washington to New York. This is done through wormhole dimensions. If the trans state creates a non-rotating black hole-like phenomenon, the Zandorist is pulled or sucked into the central point of the hole and will end up in another universe. He would be squeezed out totally from our ordinary existence to enter the never land of no return, translated into the world of shadow matter forever or to other spiritual worlds. The passage to those other universes would be done through the channel of what is called Einstein-Rosen bridges. This has been considered the ultimate time machine. Einstein-Rosen bridges. Um, Give me a sec right here. Yay. Way back. This has been considered the ultimate time machine. The most frequent or common Zandoric singularity is the rotating hole type through rotating hole type. What do they say? Yo, my throat, man. Rotating. The most frequent or common Zandoric singularity is the rotating black hole type through wormholes, leading to translation or metamorphosis within the parallel branches of our universe. All particulate matter, molecules, atoms, electrons, nucleus, quarks, gluons, weakons, quanta, psychion, shift to the left of the equation E equals mc squared. Not in a transient manner like in the Feynman diagram, but in a quasi-permanent manner for many minutes, hours, or sometimes days. In so doing, they break the conservation laws and the invariance law of physics that calls for a permanent impermanence or permanent alternation in a fraction of a second. However, sooner or later, the invariance principle will bring back the command of the conservation laws, as it is a safeguard of return to the ordinary state in our universe. The rotating Zandoric wormhole is a transitory state. It cannot last forever. Time is limited in this state of affairs. The adept, like Cinderella, must return home before midnight. Having made the quantum jump through the ambiguity barrier, the Zandorist, in its composite state with the Vodun, is a new entity in itself, a wave function presented as a coherent superposition of all possibilities. What are those possibilities? What is this? What is this Cinderella stuff I just read? Sooner or later, the invariance principle will bring back the command of the conservation laws, as it is a safeguard of return to the ordinary state in our universe. The rotating Zandoric wormhole is a transitory state. It cannot last forever. Time is limited in this state of affairs. The adept, like Cinderella, must return home before midnight. Having made the quantum jump through the ambiguity barrier, the Zandorist in his composite state with the Vodun is a new entity in itself, a wave function presented as a coherent superposition of all possibilities. What are those possibilities? The power of ubiquity, of being everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Time travel in the past and in the future, teletransportation, levitation, the power of telepathy and telekinesis, the power of visibility and invisibility, the power of materialization and dematerialization, the power of metamorphosis or avatars, the power of healing, the power of invulnerability, the power of death and resuscitation, and the power of possession or channeling over other individuals, animals, or objects. What is the mechanism of their actualization in the African Haitian realities? The actualization of any of these possibilities is a matter of choice. It is no different from what we have learned about the construct of ordinary realities. We have also seen previously that the ultimate choice at our disposal is not absolute free will. but a choice exercised within predeterminism coming from the alpha or omega dimension at the macroscopic state of ordinary reality. The effect of our mental choice is not readily apparent, such as wishing a dictator out of existence, although the mechanism of the disappearance is already at work in the quantum wonderland. The result will be activated more quickly when the whole populace becomes aware and makes the choice. Hmm, interesting. Some changes may take hundreds of years or millennia to reach actualization at the macroscopic level, but at the Zandoric wave function level, in the world of the singularities, the actualization chosen can occur in the twinkling of an eye, instantaneously in some cases. Okay, so why does it take time to manifest, though? That's the question. The psychic or psychionic wave function of our nature molds the world around us according to the principles of physics. In our branch of the parallel universes, the world is the way it is the way it appears because of our mental construct. In the Zandoric branch of reality, the mental choice of the entity that enters into a composite state with the adept actualizes any possibility at will, crossing all barriers in space time continuum, and manifests itself in all chosen branches of the parallel universes. The collapse or materialization of the wave function into a chosen actualization makes virtual all the other possibilities. Although in ordinary circumstances, all other virtualities should have vanished. But being in a black hole dimension, a world of singularities, the new entity keeps the virtual states of coherent superposition and can move from one actualization to the next ad infinitum. However, when it exits out of the rotating wormhole into ordinary reality, the Zandoric wave function collapses into the ordinary material world and the other virtualities vanish. Um, okay, let's go. How does the mental choice work? In the alternate reality of the Zandoric singularity, all masses are translated into wave function or energy state. From the EPR paradox in our concept of immanence, all variants coming from the master force, electromagnetic, radio wave, X ray, infrared, strong force, weak force, and gravity, are existentially and essentially psychism, consciousness, or psychion. In some circumstances, those variants of the master force can manifest themselves as purely psychion force in accordance to a unified field concept. However, all of them and the particulate matter that derived or evolved from those forces remain linked by the panpsychic field, otherwise known as the Einstein connection. In other words, when those forces transmute into strings and from simple strings into particles or coiled strings, according to the superstring theory, they are still psychism or consciousness. When in the Zandoric state, the adept is translated into invisible matter, axion WIMP's neutrino or into pure energy, he still remains a psychic entity that can exercise choices. Huh. However, his personal will and choices are modulated by the will of the invading Xandor. The Vodun wishes prevail, but in accordance to the contract agreed upon between themselves before they enter into composite state. In adhering to or joining Zopop or Bezango secret societies, the adept must accept the conditions imposed by the Vodus in order to enter into superposition state with the shadowy creatures. The spiritual clone of the adept, Semedo, and his IPN will be under the dominance of Zandor, or Marionnette, Pied Cheche. In order for the new entity formed by their union to function, the Loa, or Vodou, must take the lead. To achieve metamorphosis into an owl, a tiger, a snake, a spider, or a wolf, the entity has to make the choice and wish the transformation. And instantaneously, the psychic choice will mold the reality of the avatar. This is still within the realm of the equivalence of energy and mass and the unified field concept. The return to normalcy is under the boundary constraint of the conservation laws and the invariance principle that can not be broken or violated for too long. The Cinderella principle, as Andoric black hole of the rotating type, cannot persist forever. Beyond a certain duration, the very existence of the subject is in grave danger. He can be destroyed in the process or translated through a non rotating black hole condition into another universe forever. This would be a one-way trip to a shadow matter existence or other weird physicality where the invariance principle of the laws of physics, i.e., conservation laws and probability laws, do not apply. And the only way to get access to our ordinary world would be by possession of other people or channeling. Hmm. What are some of the observations reports reported by eyewitnesses or adepts? In the preceding chapter, we saw the descriptions of the ordinary crisis of possession by various persons or researchers such as Maya Deren. Even at this stage of encounter, extraordinary phenomena are often reported. The possessed, as well as people in his or her immediate vicinity, experience that high amplitude vibratory field, raising of hair, tingling sensation, paresthesias, brain disturbances, and psychological transformation. In ordinary adorcism, the lower, in order to become manifest in our plane of existence, enters a phase of high vibratory state or powerful magnetic state. It is like a phase of high excitation. This will allow the Vodou to enter into composite or superposition state with the subject or subjects. Thus, an equivalent of gravity or supergravity or high magnetic field is created. When the entity completely invades the subject, the latter is also in a high vibratory state or trance, and the psychic complex is obliterated, taken over by the lower. A force field, a protective shield, is created inside and around the person, making him invulnerable for a while to a certain extent. During that time, some possessed will chew on glass without cutting the mucous membrane of their mouth. They can drink an enormous amount of strong alcoholic beverage without getting drunk. They can rub piment, hot pepper into their eyes, mouth, or vagina in the case of women without experiencing the severe burning sensation. They can manipulate fire, hot zin, or urns for souls and burning hot iron bars with their bare hands without sustaining any injury. A gunshot, not a blank, will not harm them. A knife cannot stab them. Many strong men cannot subdue a slender teenage girl. The modulatory power of the invading lower actualizes the Vodou mask of Osterreich and Dorsainville. From the coquettish appearance of Erzuli Frida to the decrepit Grand Erzuli to the Ophidian Dambala, the bellicose Ogu, and the handicapped limping Legba. At other times, under different circumstances, the Vodou will cross the ambiguity barrier and materialize himself into a human or animal form. Here, the unified field theory works in reverse. Instead of transmutating mass into energy, it transform it will transform energy, axion or WIMPs, into electromagnetic, visible radiation or visible matter. This involves also the attainment of a high energy state, a high vibratory state, or supergravity state that, in accordance to Einstein's equivalent of gravity and mass, will manifest an avatar of the lower. In her book La Légende des Lois, Data, Mercedes Foucault Guignard, an initiate of of the Vodou tradition, describes the materialization of many Loa in her company, particularly the Vodou bookman, who was her guide in a tour of encounters with many Loa or gods around the country of Haiti. She describes in a dramatic manner her encounter with a voodoo named Grand Bois one of the four major patrons of the secret societies. The visitation took place in a dense forest at midnight. A maelstrom of high vibratory state created a whirling in the atmosphere, a thunderstorm condition with high and strong wind. The earth also began to tremble under her feet. The high magnetic field gave rise to electromagnetic radiation, and light suddenly appeared in the dark forest, and the supergravity state led to the sudden materialization of Grand Bois Lillet in front of her. Data's meaning with Agau, tonnerre, not to be confused with Agasu, the panther, occurred amid electromagnetic disturbances producing thunder in the area, with the appearance of the little green lizard. A song brought about the cascade of phenomena from wave function to mass. The singularity allowed the collapse of the wave into a lizard to change thereafter into other virtual possibilities of a coherent superposition. Thus, from the lizard, a Gaou tonnerre transmuted into a handsome elderly man, black man, dressed with a black and red shirt, blue jeans, and a straw hat. He had an Indian axe on his belt and a wooden cane with a scepter or scepter. As a son of the voodoo Dambala, he was also a king. Other avatars would follow, namely an owl, a mabuya, another type of lizard, a kulev, landomi, sleeping snake, a frog, and a cricket. Agawu can take hundreds of different faces. This encounter ended when he metamorphosed into a lizard, from a lizard into a bird, and flew away. Metamorphosed. How do you pronounce that word nicely? Forget it. Outside of the African Haitian alternate reality, the interactions of shadow matter and ordinary matter are experienced with the same unified field theory. In psychic pets and spirit animals, um, spiritual entities manifest themselves in accordance with the law of equivalencies. Flashes of lightning, the appearance of silvery, bright green lights or patterns, luminous glow, greenish glow, thunder and other noises, sudden cold sensation, mist like cloud, evil smell, sulfurous odor, and physical contact of a magnetic type are described with spirits materialization. The shadow matter that, in its ordinary state, penetrates our solid world without disturbances suddenly becomes noticeable, visible, troublesome, or helpful. This occurs in accordance with the cascade of reaction that follows a high energy state, a vibratory state, or vibratory state. Bu- 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 High energy state or vibratory state. When acceleration or supergravity state causes the WIMPs to become strong and emit photons, and from photons to transmute into other particles, leading to visible matter in its avatars. Some of these eerie encounters or apparitions are often reported in the vicinity of electric plants in stormy weather conditions, near earthquake faults, or conditions of massive release of energy. We do not know all the conditions that facilitate the production of high energy states leading to the cascade of transmutation. This will be the assignment for future researchers. At this point, we have to remind ourselves that the purpose of this book is to call attention to certain analogies between the principles of quantum physics, the equivalencies of general theory of relativity, and the alternate reality of the Vaudoons. We seem to have seen a grand unified theory, or GUT, at work in the Zandoric world of singularities. This is not yet the GUT of Albert Einstein. According to Stephen Hawking, no physicist in our time has come up with the holy grail sought by Einstein before his death. Contemporary physicists have imagined smaller GUTs, grand unified theory, but the great one remains to be discovered, and Hawking is confident that we will arrive at it by the end of the 20th century or early in the 21st century. Nevertheless, Some researchers as early as 1943 have taken the liberty of applying the Einstein equations that form the basis of a unified field theory into military operations. This is known as Project Rainbow or the Philadelphia Experiment. Their aim was a simple one: make a ship invisible by creating around it a whirlwind of forces, a high energy magnetic field that would reproduce a condition of gravity capable of deflecting light. On October 28, 1943, the Bureau of Naval Research undertook this top secret operation around the destroyer, the Elridge DE 173. That high energy field would come into being by connecting an electromagnetic field with a gravitational field around the ship in the port of Philadelphia. They used coils of electric cables called digows that vibrate or create audible vibrations, which in turn produce a powerful magnetic field over and around the destroyer. The most they could expect was a fog like condition that would make the ship invisible in the sight of the enemies. Thus, the sequence of events would go in the following manner: high energy state, high magnetic state, high vibratory state, high acceleration, high gravitational field, wormhole event, singularities, or just invisibility. What happened? Bingo! The ship became invisible. Researchers got much, much more than they bargained for: the expected windfall of singularities. We do not know in detail the technology used in Project Rainbow. We are given only a general statement of connecting electromagnetic field with gravitational field to create a powerful magnetic field, and the result was a cascade of reactions instead of a simple cloud or fog covering the ship to make it invisible. If the only thing the researchers used was the degauss, a device capable of preventing explosion of magnetic mines, a coil of electric cable put around the ship's hull to neutralize the magnetic field of mines, we should not be surprised to learn that the African Haitian Nkisi or amulets are endowed with capabilities of provoking reactions or transformations in our three-dimensional world. There seem to exist simple procedures or rituals capable of provoking space-time events similar to a Lorentz butterfly effect. The insect flips its wings in the east, and the consequence is a hurricane in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico. Our Cartesian rationality could expect only a camouflage cloud from the production of the powerful magnetic field, but instead, the researchers stumbled into the singularities of other dimensions. The destroyer and its crew were subjected to dematerialization, invisibility, teletransportation to another location, journey to shadow matter dimension, and telepathically communicated with creatures of parallel universes. This sounds like pure science fiction, a fairy tale, but it happened to them, sailors of the destroyer Elridge DE 173 in the port of Philadelphia on October 28, 1943. There are many similarities between the phenomena of Project Rainbow, the Sandoric singularities, and other psychic experiences. The appearance of a cloud or fog is common to all of them. Sometimes it is a bright light or a bright cloud. Let us mention also the burning bush of Moses and the Shekinah glory of the desert, or the Holy of Holies of the temple in the Old Testament. In the case of the Elridge, a brilliant green fog covered the whole ship, making it invisible. A strong odor was also perceived, like the evil sulphurous smell of witches. Abnormal physical sensations were felt throughout the body, caused by the strong vibratory state. The ship, as well as the crew, was subjected to that high magnetic field, and it produced a sound field that reminds us of the psychedelic experience of Maya Deren during her crisis of possession. She described it as being encaged in a well of sound, and the sound grew stronger, louder, like a thundering clamor, a clanging bell, a deafening noise. On aboard the destroyer, the sailors experienced the sound wave, varying from a low pitch to a high pitch. The vibration and the sound wave penetrated every layer of their body, taking possession of their bones, their flesh, and molecules. 1 minute later, the ship disappeared from the Philadelphia wharf and rematerialized in Norfolk, Virginia. in a port 400 kilometers away. 1 minute after it dematerialized again and teletransported back in a port of Philadelphia, where it rematerialized inside the green cloud. The Philadelphia experiment was a success as far as invisibility was concerned, but for the sailors on crew and the engineers, it was a catastrophe, a journey into the abyss of hell. One crew member, Victor Silverman, was hospitalized for 6 months thereafter at the Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. He was also discharged from the military after illness. He subsequently suffered 3 heart attacks that he attributed to the effects of Project Rainbow. Another member of the research group, Carlos Allende, gave more details to a physician named M.K. Jessup on the effects of the experiment on the passengers of the ship. Allende reported on the physiologic, behavioral, mental, and physical disturbances caused by the experiment on the crew member designated frozen by the Navy. In fact, many of them could not move after their rematerialization in the port of Philadelphia. They were in a paralysis-like or semi-comatose state, or rather like zombies who were breathing, seeing, eating, or functioning in a daze or a perpetual trance-like condition. They were in another world. It took them 6 months to show signs of permanent recovery. Many described their experience as being caught in the flow or in the rush or in embottled caged in and bottled or going at full speed. After 10 years, there were very few survivors of the experiment. Most of them fell into insanity. Other late and eerie phenomena befell some crew members. One of them went through a transmutation into a shadow matter in front of his wife, his child, and 2 other crew members. He just walked through the wall of his quarters and disappeared forever, translated into another universe. 2 others went up in flame by spontaneous combustion while transporting a compass from the ship for the ship. Others reported having gone to a parallel universe and spoken to strange creatures. The remaining survivors were discharged from the military for insanity reasons. Carlos Allende stressed the interactions with entities of the world of singularity. The transmuted crew was in wave function, an axionic state, and spoke to entities of shadow matter dimension. They described those dark matter beings as having a labile, ever-changing shape. Their physicality appeared unstable, billowing like in a boiling state. This reminds us of the permanent impermanence or the permanence of transiency of a Feynman diagram. The crew had the impression that communication was established telepathically with the shadow beings who were able to read their minds and to be located at the same time in front of them, in the middle of the cloud, and inside of them. That impression was terrifying, and if the experiment had lasted longer, they would have coalesced with those entities, changing their materiality to disappear forever into the shadowy invisible world. Thanks to the Cinderella principle, the conservation laws were able to take over on time. There also is the likelihood that the whole experience was a collective hallucination caused by the exposure to high magnetic field. Moreover, they could have been victim of a UFO intervention. Having discovered such a great secret of nature, that of teletransportation, transmutation, and invisibility, while playing some while playing with some ideas derived from the concept of grand unified theory, it would be tempting to continue to delve deeper in such technology. The research must continue in great secrecy, and what is more important, this application of science must not be revealed to opposing superpowers or even to allied powers. This knowledge can give the ultimate weapon, something as terrifying as atomic or nuclear weapons, and some of the so-called unidentified flying objects may be the result of the application of such knowledge. How far are the superpowers in their exploitation of that philosopher's stone? From 1943, the Second World War, to the present, great strides have been accomplished in that science and in the quantum field theory in general. We can postulate that technologies derived from the Philadelphia experiment are being developed in the top secret area of the Nevada desert named Area 51. In the early 1990s, many books appeared revealing psychic discoveries beyond the Iron Curtain. The Soviets, like their American counterparts, were actively doing research and discovering wonders in the realm of ESP. But the major developments would have to remain secret for a long time. The authorities prefer to entertain the public with the ideas of extraterrestrials visiting us, of establishing projects like SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, in an attempt to pick up signals coming from other civilizations in the universe or in our backyard, the Milky Way. Personally, we are not rejecting in total the possibility of other beings in the universe, as from a statistical point of view. Many solar systems like ours should exist in our galaxy and beyond, but we doubt very much that they should have evolved like the biological beings on our planet. Although the scientists have discovered some complex organic materials or things resembling worms in meteorites. However, from a quantum land point of view, we recognize the possibility and the probability of beings in parallel universes or in the shadow matter dimension. However, from a quantum land point of view, we recognize the possibility and the probability of beings in parallel universes or in the shadow matter dimension. They would be called paraterrestrials. They do not need a painstaking Tao in evolution because they can materialize in our world under certain conditions within some boundary constraints. Project Rainbow and others secretly performed would have opened the door to us to do likewise, that is, to dematerialize and enter their world of shadow matter. This type of experiment is very expensive and loaded with dire consequences and undesirable adverse effects. It would be very neat if we could have something like the teleporter chambers of Star Trek, where we could say, Scotty, beam me up. A big puzzle in Project Rainbow remains the link between Philadelphia and Norfolk. Why did the destroyer appear in Norfolk instead of other places in Pennsylvania? Does the translation occur at random? Is there a network of Penrose wormholes with specific lines of communication? It is probable that the area in the port of Philadelphia where Project Rainbow took place was one of those vortices mentioned by Malidoma Some in his book of Water and the Spirit. Those vortices or wormholes are scattered around around planet Earth and communicate with other dimensions or locations on the globe or elsewhere in the cosmos. Among them are the Bermuda Triangle through Forban in Haiti and the initiation camp in Dagara Land, a clearing where the elders can draw a circle on top of the Gate of Singularities. Also, some caves, ponds, brooks, rivers, and rivulets have an entrance to parallel universes. The Port of Philadelphia falls into that category. It is likewise for an area in Norfolk, Virginia. Apparently, the experimenters of Project Rainbow chose the wrong spot to do their fieldwork. They created the high energy, high magnetic, high vibratory state that will induce the supergravity state capable of triggering the cascade of equations leading to the opening of the gate of light, the event horizon that propels things and beings into the Zandoric travel. The researchers accidentally open a Roger Penrose wormhole or tunnel of singularities that exists as a communication pathway between Philadelphia and Norfolk. The former is a black hole equivalent. The latter is a white hole equivalent. So far, this is one aspect of the weird reality we are studying. There exist other means or conditions, such as the trans state, that can open doors of singularities. Surprisingly, we already have a variant of the Star Trek wizardry outside the Western research centers in the African Haitian alternate reality. It is offered by the Pedro Zandor rituals. In that ritual, Project Rainbow is an everyday occurrence for the practicing Zandorist. No Haitian would be surprised by this statement. Most Natif Natal Haitians raised on the island and nurtured in the alternate reality of the country through the oral tradition of storytelling, the services performed in the privacy of their family or the immediate rainbow in the immediate neighborhood through the extended family or laku. and Humfo are aware of the Zandorist's power, although they realize that some runaway legends are mixed with the phenomena. However, we must remember that the universe is not only queerer than we imagine, but it is queerer than we can suppose, according to JBS Haldane. At the carnival period, Vodou bands or groups and the raras take over the streets, offering an amalgam of Vodou symbols, realities, legends, and a great sense of humor. Most Haitians have witnessed Vodou ceremonies or services. Everybody has heard of zombie, zobop, loup-garou, and the like. In my neighborhood of Port-au-Prince, when I was a teenager, an old lady was singled out as a loup-garou, and people were wary of her maleficent deeds. We all knew about Voyer Mort, dispatch of destructive dead spirits, Voyer Poudre, poisoning at a distance, and Coup de Flash, using a beam of light to transfer poison. We all had heard about Prend Point, that is, having a contract with someone with some terrible law to get rich, or rather big favor. One of the most familiar legends about Point Garou is that of a woman transforming herself into a flying monster, shedding her skin and hiding it in a secure place in her house. In her new state, she can suck the blood of animals and men like Dracula the vampire, or devour people like the lycanthrope. She can be destroyed by sprinkling pepper or piment over and inside the skin so that she cannot put it back on. She would wither away and die. We all had heard about heavy sacrifices required to become a Zobop, such as agreeing to donate a loved one to the devil. Many of us have witnessed from afar or close up the flying of Zopop at night, passing through the skies like shooting stars or jumping from tree to tree, from hill to hill like circular balls of fire, or bouncing on the ground at close range. Most of us have heard of humans metamorphosed into a goat or other animal by magic spells and sold on the marketplace. It has been reported that on occasion a goat with a golden tooth is found at the butcher's place. Nobody trusts owls, bats, or black cats. They seem to be favorite avatars of the Zandorists. Some animals are not supposed to be wandering around at night, such as a hen followed by her little chickens. If one encounters such bizarre phenomena, one should put a distance between them and self. When it comes to the question of zombie, everybody in the world knows about them, from Hollywood to Wall Street. Recently, the concept has been revitalized by Wade Davis's bestseller, The Serpent and the Rainbow, and by René Depestre's bestseller in France, Hadriana dans tous mes rêves. These two authors have offered to the public one of the forms of zombification, the chemical zombie. Wade Davis, as an exobotanist, has obtained from adepts the identification of plants and animals used in the formulation of zombie poisons. Some were already known by scientists. However, he was told that he could still not make a zombie by using the revealed pharmacopoeia. Of course, he could use them to anesthetize people, to make them unconscious, and then wait for their recovery, like in an operating room. But a real zombie is something else. It encompasses a Zandoric phenomenon. In De Pestre's novel, the young Hadriana escaped from the Bokor right after she was given an antidote by the latter. This is good for entertainment, but in real Haitian alternate reality, it is not that simple. Right after she was given an antidote. Okay. The Zandoric dimension makes a whole world of difference. In Lila's um, Desquirion, Desquirion's novel, Le Chemin de l'Oco Miroir, A young woman is zombified by her mulatto family to prevent her involvement with a black man. Likewise, she's a chemical zombie. The author, who knows very well the Zandoric aspect, has chosen willingly that chemical presentation. That chemical presentation. The non Western aspect of zombification works through the actions of entities that enter into superposition state with the victim, like in an ordinary adorcism, and creates the signs of death, rigor mortis. Because of the Cinderella principle, the body must be exhumed at the appropriate time, and the pharmacopoeia is then used to keep the individual in bondage. Mesmerism or hypnotism may be used by the Bokor as well. Table salt employed in Desquerion's novel to bring the heroine fully back to normal is an antidote to some drugs of the armamentarium, but not to all of them. The zombie that have been rehabilitated and returned to the world of the living have been able to undergo such a treatment because they were removed from the field of action of the Boko and his cohort of shadow matter entities, drugs, and magnetism. Among the scholars and initiates who have presented major works on Vodou alternate reality, Claude Planson was the first one to give an eyewitness account of Petro Zandor singularities in his book La Vaudou, published in France in 1987. Wade Davis, who came after him in chronology, was also introduced to the window dressing part of the ceremonies. Planson and his guide, the Mambo Matilda Beauvoir, had an encounter of the third kind with the Zandoric singularities. They were face to face with creatures from the wormholes of the Einstein-Rosen bridge dimensions. First, they drove to a distant hillbilly countryside, away from the lights and the big cities and modern comforts. They walked up to the top of the hill and up into a plateau. There, they met an assembly of 30 persons, a mix of young and old Haitians, standing around a potomitan in the open, in the middle of nowhere. The area turned out to be a cemetery. How did they get there? The only car in the area was that of the author and his companion, and it was left way below the hill. Planson was told the ceremonial service was in its seventh day. Did they arrive by helicopter? Soon he was to discover some other means of traveling through space-time. The Zandoris proceeded to sacrifice a black goat and a pig. It was not done in the swift manner usually done by the religious or benevolent voodooists. It was rather a sadistic killing done to produce suffering or to take vengeance. Were those animals the surrogates of other enemies, or were they the enemies metamorphosed into animals by Zandoric transmutation? Other phenomena that followed will influence Planson to believe the second assumption. Following the gory butchering, the goat and the pig cadavers were hung from the central pole Potomitan. From the assembly emerged a very old lady who carefully stood upon the chair, wrapped a cord securely attached to the pole around her neck, and then jumped, strangling herself to death. After some jerky motion, she became stiff, along with the signs of strangulation, bluish face, and protruding tongue. The cadavers remained hanged on the pole for a good length of time. Then someone came over and cut the cords. They fell on the ground as an inner pile of flesh. But suddenly, they bounced back on their feet, alive, and began to dance. This phenomena are produced by Sandoric adorcism. The old lady who hung herself did so while being in composite state with the Vodun. She was protected from complete annihilation by the axionic entity straddling her. Being ubiquitous, the Zandor spirit penetrated as well the cadavers of the sacrificed animals and reanimated them into a sabbatical dance. The tempo was given by the Vodou drums and the adepts singing and clapping hands. When the music stopped, the cadavers fell again on the ground, lifeless. However, the old witch was reanimated by the assembly in the manner done for a Husi in a post possession state. She was placed on a chair shaken by jerks and the calling of her name. On regaining consciousness, a drink was given to her. The fate of the animals was quite different. Those metamorphosed human beings, cabrit sans poil, were cut into pieces to be added to a stew boiling in some cauldrons. Their testicles were eaten raw by a woman possessed by a very violent spirit. Later on, a man was mounted by a raging axionic entity, a hellish fiend who liked fire. A pyre was built for him, and an iron bar was planted in the middle of the fire. When the iron bar turned red, the possessed man seized it with his bare hands and wielded it in front of the assembly. The people in the front row ebbed backward at the approach of the brazen fire. The possessed man was invulnerable to the fire because of the energy field created by the presence of the shadow matter entity in and around him. The possessed man was invulnerable to the fire because of the energy field created by the presence of the shadow matter entity in and around him. It is that same energetic field that protects the adept in superposition state against stab wounds, bullet wounds, and in the case of the patient who sustained a major operation without anesthesia. The surgical procedure performed without anesthesia is reported by Dr. Jacques Ravi in his book Errance et Certitude. During the operation, the Loa maintained a conversation with the surgical team. In the post-op period, the patient had no recollection of the events. Claude Planson, the White House Hunsi Kanzo, the White Hunsi Kanzo, and his guide Mambo Matilda Beauvoir witnessed also that night the singularity of the flying Zobobs. As they were coming down from the sky, Claude Planson mistook them for shooting stars in the clear night sky. He was sorry that he did not have time to make a wish. The first one was to be followed by two other streaking meteorite-like objects. However, they showed a bizarre behavior. On landing at the top of a hill, they jumped back up again and landed on other hills until they arrived at the service location. As they approached their outlines became clearer and revealed something like balls of fire moving at high speed. Those balls of fire had a changing luminescence, an iridescence of colors passing from red to green or yellow. The first one to land on the plateau at close range revealed a man inside a luminous orb. A light progressively faded and disappeared, leaving in front of them an authentic human being with a hawkish appearance and a fierce demeanor. The other two followed suit in the same manner. Claude Planson had witnessed the same phenomenon in Africa, in Dogon land, but not so close up. Here we seem to have the forward backward actualization of the famous mass energy equation. Forward backwards actualization. The trans state of Vodun, an adept superposition, creates the new entity Zobob that shifts the alternation diagram from matter to energy and then moves through the space-time at luminal speed or near luminal velocity. Then, reversing the equation from energy to mass, it allows materialization of the individual into a biological being. The Einstein equivalent of high energy acceleration with gravity and gravity to mass is fundamental in these Andoric singularities. The conservation laws help in re-establishing the status quo of normalcy or reactualization as an ordinary human being. It is commonly repeated in Haiti that in the twinkling of an eye, so to speak, a whole band of Zobob can travel from Port-au-Prince to Cap-Haïtien during their nights of Sabbat. In the first century of the current era, the Apostle Paul recounted his teletransportation to the third heaven, but he was unable to establish the modus operandi, that is, to know if that was done with the body or out of the body. Likewise, the Castañeda, the sorcerer apprentice of the 1960s, could not determine if he did actually fly like a bird. His enigmatic teacher, Don Juan, the Yaqui Indian, replied that a bird flies like a bird, but a man flies in a different way. The African Haitian ontology tells us that teletransportation can be done in two different manners. One is through the semedo component, the shadow matter of the individual, that every night leaves the body to wander around, and the other way is through the Zandoric singularity of transmutation of matter into energy and energy back into matter. Mm. For Claude Planson and Mathilde Beauvoir, this was really the night of the grizzly, and they were really scared. It was an overwhelming fear, an uncontrollable terror provoked by the sheer presence or the closeness of the singularities. They wanted to leave at once, and the leader of the assembly concurred and enjoined them to leave as well. Going down the hill, they encountered other weird phenomena that belonged to the realm of the Zandoric journey. Their old lemon of a car suddenly appeared in front of them. It was probably teletransported closer to them on the winding road so that they could leave the place in a speedy manner. It started right away at the first turn of the key, which was unusual for that old machine. Planson was driving by jerks and he almost crashed into a cow that was sitting quietly in the middle of the road at some point. He stopped just in time to see the cow looking at them in a very indifferent manner. He tried to scare the animal away with the high beam of the car headlights by blowing the horn. To no avail, the cow would not move. Planson wanted to step out of the car to chase it away, but Matilda warned him not to do so because they were dealing with a transmutation. What the heck? Planson opened the car door to exit when suddenly the cow vanished. Wow. And they heard a Mephistophelian laugh that reverberated all around. Here we can see an equivalence between the Zandoric journey and Project Rainbow. The latter uses very sophisticated modern technology to bring about transmutation. The former uses psychic power, incantations, sounds, rhythms, psychedelic drugs or potions, ointments, specific colors, and gestures to establish connection with the parallel universe of shadow matter entities. The connection brings a superposition state that triggers a high energy vibratory state or trance that opens the door of the equivalence of vibration to gravity and gravity to the other forces of nature, electromagnetism, magnetism, strong force, weak force, and psychion or psychic force. The physical things are transformed into wave function with all its possibilities and probabilities and all the principles and paradoxes of quantum land. We have been told of the dangers and fatal adverse effects of Project Rainbow: mental distress or derangement, paralysis or paresis, coronary damage, sudden disappearance or dematerialization in total oblivion, and spontaneous combustion. The Zandoric journey also has its adverse effects. The connection with the entities is dangerous in itself. The individual can be destroyed at the onset if proper knowledge, gestures, and rituals are not performed. The Zandor Voduns are cruel, violent, and unpredictable. The Voduns are very demanding, and if the services are not performed on time or in proper sequences, calamities and death may ensue. Loved ones, sons, daughters, parents, or close relatives are destroyed or given to maintain the contract with the evil Zandoric spirits. The Zandorists themselves often died of violent fashion. According to Planson, Erzuli Rouge, or Mapiang, is a wild beast that can devour her children or adepts if she is not properly tamed by rituals. On the other hand, she will protect and defend her adepts against foes like a panther or a tiger. Mali Domasome, in the account of his initiation, is an African shaman, described in great detail in one of the most dangerous rituals that he had been subjected to. It is a journey to the invisible parallel dimension of the Contomon, or spirits, through the gate of light or vortex of a wormhole. In Haiti, the Hugan or Vodou priest of the Nago Yoruba and Rada Dahomey traditions is not apparently subjected to travel into the bottomless pit of the wormhole tunnel of apocalyptic proportion. One second. All right. It is a boko of the Bakongo or Petro traditions and the Zandorist covenants with the Zandor family of Loa that have to go through this dangerous initiation. Shamans like Max Beauvoir in Washington, D.C., practice the benevolent tradition of the Dahomean that, according to him, has nothing nefarious or diabolical. Some likewise, where we at? Okay. Some likewise is oriented toward helping others find enlightenment and practice good deeds. His Andoric like initiation did not make him a Zobop, or a Lugaru. At any rate, some preparation rituals were necessary to gain the favors of the gate's guardians and to protect the elders and the initiates. They had to shield everybody in the camp against many hazards, such as nuclear radiation or other forces released in the process. The area of reactions was limited by a circle drawn upon the center of the vortex with ash and some black medicine, feathers of a chicken offered in the Holocaust were scattered on the periphery of the circle. An elder dressed like a warrior or a priest or a high priest, shielded with pink phosphorescent paint of invisibility on his body, a magic wand in his hand, and a medicine bag loaded with Nkisi or Wanga, walked around four other elders holding a buffalo skin above the circle of ash. He was singing in primal language, using words that have power of creation or annihilation. The song was accompanied by the vibrations of the conical drum that played a great role in inducing the high energy supergravity state that contributed to the production of an energy field of immense magnitude. Instead of heat, the occurrence of that energy field produced a very cold temperature. That was the production of nuclear reaction in the cool instead of the inferno resulting from atomic or nuclear weaponry. The first sensation of the initiates was a coolness that soon was transferred into the icy cold atmosphere all around them. They were shivering violently, their teeth were chattering, and they felt like they were losing control of their organism. They were like in a state of adorcism or superposition state.